When I was 18 years old, I bought my first property deal, which made me £26,000 profit. And in this video, I'm going to be explaining to you exactly how I did it. And so the story starts when I was 17 years old. And by this point, I'd already tried to start a few businesses. I had a couple clothing brands, which failed. I had a events business, which failed. I even had a watch dealing business which didn't take off. And then on the 28th of September 2014, I saw a Facebook ad for a free property training event here in London at the Cumberland Hotel, which I decided to attend. And ultimately, that became one of the most important decisions I ever made in my life. And it was at this event where I learned about property investing. And I knew property wasn't some kind of fad. It wasn't some kind of scheme, some kind of get rich quick scheme. You know, property is something that's been around for centuries, and we all know someone that's been successful and made money from property. So I decided this is what I wanted to do, and I decided to invest in myself and my education with the little money that I had and go all in on this journey. Now, when I left school, I started working as a self-employed estate agent to kind of make some money and save up some money, but I was going out trying to find my first property deal. And honestly, I had no idea how I was even going to fund this property deal, but I knew two things. I knew, one, success is not about what resources you do or don't have. It's ultimately about how resourceful you can be. And secondly, I knew there was no shortage of money in the world. And so if I could find a good deal, just by being resourceful, I'd be able to find the money and go out and find maybe partners or borrow money to make it happen. And ultimately, that's what I did. And finding my first property deal was not an easy process. You know, I viewed lots of properties. I made lots of offers which got rejected, or the offers fell through. You know, people weren't taking me seriously. But after 12 months, I finally found a property where I got my offer accepted. And it was a 2-bedroom terraced house in Coventry. It needed a load of work, and I managed to get the offer agreed for a great price. And I'm going to share the numbers of the deal in a second. Now, the property needed everything doing to it. It needed new flooring, it needed new plasterwork, we had to go back to brick, it needed new kitchen, new bathrooms. The ceilings had asbestos, which I had no idea about until I bought the property and got my builder in. And as we all know, it isn't cheap to fix asbestos. Rendering outside, pretty much everything. But of course, this means there's lots of opportunity to add value, force an uplift in the property, and ultimately make a profit. Now, before we talk about how I managed to fund or finance this deal, in terms of the numbers, at a very high level, I agreed to buy the property for £85,000. When I made my offer, I made sure I put my offer in writing. I gave the estate agent all of the information, made sure they understood that I was in a good position and I was ready to buy, and they took me seriously. And after a bit of negotiation, we managed to get the deal agreed. The total costs on the property was £20,000, and this includes all of the refurbishment works plus the in and out costs. So the legal fees for the purchase and for the sale of the property, the estate agency fees, and of course, kind of any insurances and the interest for holding the property for that period of time. I made a lot of mistakes when it came to project managing it. It took me far longer than it should have. I think it really took me like 6 months to do this refurb. Really, that should have been done in 4 to 6 weeks. But I always tell people the value in doing your first deal is not in how much money you make, but it's in the lessons that you learn. And so doing your first deal is just such an important milestone that I encourage all of you to just work for. Forget about anything beyond that point. Just do your first deal, because that's where the magic happens. And what it does to your mindset and your psychology is just so powerful. So from that point, you just have the confidence and self-belief that, okay, I can do this and I can make this work. And so after the costs, essentially, I was all in on the deal for £105,000. And I put the property on the market. I managed to get a bit of competition between buyers, and ultimately sold the property for £131,000, pocketing me £26,000 profit, which was more money than I'd ever seen in my life. And I felt like a millionaire, and I was immediately on Auto Trader looking at Lamborghinis. So you're probably wondering, how did I fund this deal? And like I say, I didn't have a lot of money. I was working as an estate agent, and throughout that 12-month period of me trying to find this deal, I managed to save just over £8,000 to put towards it, which obviously wasn't going to be enough. Now, the banks gave me a mortgage for the majority of the purchase price, but I really still had to fund the £20,000 worth of costs. So this came from a combination of borrowing money from friends. I can't remember exactly how much. It was in the region of £5,000 to £10,000, where they would just loan me money. I'd agree an interest rate and say, look, I will pay you back in 6 months with a 10% or a 12% interest. I used credit cards, and I also lived paycheck to paycheck for 6 months, where as soon as I get paid at the end of the month, I would literally be paying the tradespeople for their works, whether it was the plasterers, the window fitters. And so yeah, I was living kind of hand to mouth for that period. But of course I knew that I was going to get paid at the end. So it worked out nicely. And point being is, like I say, with property, one of the most important skills and character traits you can develop is the ability to be resourceful. And for me, doing this deal was never a question of, can I do it? It was just a question of, how am I going to do this? When you start to ask those questions, you come up with answers. And I just knew that one way or another, all of these problems I had, whether it was a lack of funds, couldn't find the right deals, any of these problems had solutions, and I just had to learn the skills and the process of finding these deals, negotiating, raising finance, and finding money. And that's ultimately what I did. And also, I wasn't building my network. I wasn't surrounding myself with enough people on the same mission as me, or people that were ahead of me that I could learn from. But in terms of friendships or building a network kind of much closer to me, it wasn't something I'd started to do until kind of later into my property journey.